All right, welcome back to my million part series on hand piecing with a running stitch. So in order to get to a million videos, which it won't actually be, we'll get into some pretty particular things. So one of the things I struggled with when I was first learning how to hand sew was what the heck I was supposed to do with the back. So if you're used to English paper piecing, you'll know that you wrap all the fabric around these little pieces of paper while you're sewing, or before you sew them. And so the seams are all nice and tidy at the end. It saves a lot of time to do hand piecing with a running stitch versus English paper piecing, but one thing you don't have is tidy seams. So when I finish, here's a partially sewn one, my backs look sort of like this. And if you iron them all flat, you can see I've added a dime in there, but you get the idea. You get kind of this. So you can definitely iron them all totally flat and kind of angle them so that they lay on top of each other like that. The one drawback of this is if you're hand sewing, or even if you're machine sewing and your machine isn't very good at going through a lot of layers, this creates some bulk, because if you look here, you actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 layers of fabric here on your corners. So one way you can open that up is by doing the seam opening technique, and I'm going to show you really quick how to do that. Just a little trivia here, this piece was kind of fussy and I wanted every piece to be in an order, so I actually numbered the pieces. You can see that on the back. Now this won't show once the quilt's made. But I was carrying this along with me and I wanted this to kind of go in a certain pattern around it. And so when I put it in my travel kit, I numbered the pieces so that I knew what order to sew them together. Anyway, so let's look at how you create these really cool open seam or twisted corners on your seams. Just real quick, with a running stitch, you don't want to press your seams open, which would be like to do this, to open them up flat all the way, because the running stitch just isn't as densely sewn, and you can start to get batting poking through, and I just think it creates stress. I don't know, maybe some people do it, but I've never seen it recommended. So the first thing you want to do is you want to press your seam allowances that are kind of radiating outwards. You want to press those so they're alternating, pointing inward. So in this block, both of the seams are laying inside towards it. This one, they'll both be pointing out. This one, they'll be pointing in. Continue to radiate outwards. And this one, they'll be both pointing out, and this one pointing in. Okay? And then you're going to alternate them. So one is on the bottom seam, one is pointing down and one is pointing up. And what happens when I lift this up, you can see that it opens up my seams to create that little spiral of seams. And that's just what happens when you create that pattern. And then I'll just take my tip of my iron and poke that down. Okay, so we'll go around, and again, one of these is pointing down at the bottom, and so then I need to fold this one up, and when I fold that up, once again, I get that nice little seams opening right up, nice and tidy. So it's really pretty simple. It can be a little tedious, and like I said, you don't have to be so careful with your seams if you don't care. But it does help it lay flat. The prettier it looks on the back, the prettier it looks on the front. But it's, and if you are going to be hand quilting it, and you're going to be doing anything in the seams, now you can always hand quilt it by just echoing the shapes or not going into the seams at all. And then the bulk in the seams aren't going to cause you any grief if you're not sewing through them. But if you're going to be doing any kind of motif on the front with hand quilting, and you're going to be trying to move your needle through all those layers, you're going to be kicking yourself if you haven't opened your seams up. And so now what we have, instead of, what did we count? 7 layers deep. we have a couple points that are 4. So right here it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So at the thickest you have 4 seams in a stack, and so you've almost cut that by half, and you get a clever little look. And if I sprayed that or starched that with water, those seams would lay down a lot crisper. My iron actually wasn't super hot when I was sewing this, so just to let you know. So yeah, that's a little bit. Now for the more complicated designs, this trick mainly only works with hexagons, but most designs are amenable in some way to this kind of seam spinning, and if you puzzle over the pattern long enough, you'll probably be able to figure out the way to make it all lay down and behave. So that's how I iron my hexagons.